Hi, Dr. P here to talk about digital, which is to say electronic game pricing. This is in two parts. It's going to take quite a while. Usual caveats, the slides are very wordy. I expect most people will actually listen rather than watch. So, we're talking about the pricing of games that are electrons, downloadable games. I don't misuse the term digital for this because digital means having discrete results with nothing in between, like dice. Dice are digital. So I'm not going to change the meaning of the word. Fundamentally, for any item, there are three ways to price it. One, you charge what the market will pay, or two, you charge what you think is a fair price for the value of the game. Now, that may be higher or lower than what the market thinks is a fair price for the value. Value is really a subjective measure and varies from one person to another. So this is a bit chancy. Or three, you charge a fair price for the time and effort involved in creating whatever it is. But buyers don't care about that, nor have they any way of knowing how much time and effort it took. People nowadays tend to assume that brain work is much easier and much less time consuming than it actually is. But no matter which of these three you choose, if the market won't pay what you want to charge, do you have any alternative? In a capitalist society, evidently not. That may be annoying. Artists may dislike it greatly, but that's the way capitalism works. Video games especially are a can of worms here because free-to-play has driven down the price of games. Now keep in mind, free-to-play games don't exist as some conspiracy. They exist because people were having trouble selling games at what they thought was a fair market price. People didn't buy them. So they had to give them away and find other ways to collect money. Consider also, some pundits tell us if the cost of making another copy of a game is nothing, and the cost of selling another is next to nothing, then sooner or later the price will be nothing or close to it. We already see near zero pricing in humble bundles. What about subscriptions to a publisher's game? Microsoft tried to do this for their productivity software. I don't know how successful they have been, but Office 365 appears to be prospering, which is of course a yearly subscription. Video gamers now are so used to nearly free games that I doubt they'd pay for subscriptions. Look at the fate of subscription-based MMOs. Most of them have converted to free-to-play, and even WoW and EVE now offer free play for the lower levels, because otherwise they can't get anybody to participate, or not enough people. We could also ask ourselves, could anyone other than the very largest publishers make a go of subscriptions? I don't think so. What about the Netflix model? So gamers subscribe and they can get anything from a large list of available games. Well, Netflix involves a different way of doing things, and Kieran Bloomfield put it this way. Netflix works because the content producers have made most of the money they'll make from their content before it gets released on Netflix. If everyone stops going to the movies and cancels their cable subscriptions, which some people are already doing, the whole thing will come crashing down. Games are not a similar situation. Well, what about big discounts? Well, big discounts can only get so big. So I've found some information about sales on Steam, which is the PC-based distribution system, and a good way to track the sales of downloadable games. What happens when the games are sold at big discounts? Quote, the median income for games with 25%, 33%, and 50% discounts was $90,000, with no significant difference between games cutting the price by those proportions. Increase that to 66%, however, and median revenue falls to $75,000. At 75%, it drops to $40,000. So at this point, to interject, the discounts are reducing the total volume of sales. Quote, but the spread of sales is far from even. Only 1,050 of the 4,390 games that received discounts in the summer sale shifted more than 5,000 units, the minimum level to be included in Steam Spy's data. That's less than 25%. So we can't rely entirely on this data. Nonetheless, it appears that big discounts become self-defeating at some point. Could we possibly see a revival of game prices via esports? No. What proportion of esports games are free to play? The two biggest, a combination of money and popularity, are League of Legends and Dota 2. At number 3, we have a non-F2P game, StarCraft 2. Of the top 10, many are quite old, such as Halo 3 and Counter-Strike. And many, again, are free to play. What about bundles, humble or not? Games offered in groups, often at pay-what-you-want prices or heavily discounted prices. Because remember, for downloadable games, making a copy costs nothing. We even see bundles now in tabletop RPG books because they can be distributed as PDFs. Well, add in the black market in Steam keys, for PC games anyway, where the publisher makes no money, and it gets worse for the publishers, and we won't even mention piracy. So what can you do? Well, you can try advertising and branding, but that only works for really big companies in general. The publisher has to have sufficient money for the advertising, or has to have a track record where their brand is well known. Almost all the top 10 mobile publishers, for example, spend a lot on advertising. Someone like Blizzard can rely on their brand and some advertising. Big console games benefit from massive advertising, but that's not practical for the rest of us, for the great unwashed, the silent majority. So in general, there's a rush to the bottom for downloadable game prices. And the publishers contribute to that, and in part 2, I'll talk about how they contribute, the tragedy of the commons. Thanks for listening.